virtual Q&A session, and I'm very glad to welcome here our coach Michelle. So, hi Michelle, how are you today?
Hi, Veronica. I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Finally, I am enjoying summer, not summer sun, but spring sun, and it's really, really strong. So I'm a little bit tan already, but
Nice.
yeah.
I'm
So
jealous. I don't have, as you can tell, pasty white. We are
yeah,
starting to get some sun as well, but I haven't had a
yeah.
chance to get out there.
Um,
So,
First, I get red. Only then it gets brown.
no, you look very tan. I was going to ask you
Yeah.
after the session, like, how did this happen so quickly?
It
Tell
was
me
no
your
intention.
secret.
I just didn't use any sunscreen, so be
Right.
careful with this.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, we have already got some questions on our
Okay.
YouTube channel, and I have made a banner. So we have a really nice question from Adrian. Adrian. So, hi. I've read the books, watched the videos, and find the teachings really resonate with me. However, I don't sleep more than 6 hours a night and I still feel tired. Not sure what more I can do. So, what are your thoughts when you hear this, Michelle?
Yeah. Well, so many things. I think the first thing to comment on is her last statement around I can't sleep more than 6 hours a night. Like, how do I get more? And you know, everybody sleeps different amounts, and I think sometimes we can start to hear that we need to be aiming for that magical 8 hours, and it can actually make us start to track and assess our sleep and feel like we aren't getting enough and we need to push to get more. All of this can create so much struggle when really, an average adult is going to sleep around probably 6.5 hours a night, something like that, as opposed to this prized 8 hours. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you feel like you should be sleeping a lot more, if you're pushing for that, a lot of the time isn't necessary at all. Now, but she also said, but I'm feeling tired, right? So it's hard because whenever we're answering these questions, we don't have a lot of context or backstory. But I'm going to make an assumption that perhaps you've been recovering from insomnia this past little while, and that even though you are sleeping more, you're feeling really tired. So I know that's a bit of an assumption, but I have to go there, I guess, right? And because it's such a common thing that we see all the time is the moment we are sleeping more, that we actually feel more tired as opposed to suddenly refreshed and feeling great. And that's really normal, right? As our hyperarousal levels go down, as we start to sleep more, we always feel more tired. It really starts to unmask a lot of the fatigue that we're carrying from the hard experience that we just went through. And so the biggest part is to not, try to force this stage of feeling kind of tired to end, not to try to push, push through or anything like that. But just, and I know it's really frustrating, but similar to how we talk about befriending wakefulness and all of that, it's befriending this stage that of recovery where you are feeling more tired. And over time, that will shift and move, but accepting that for now, you're going through some fatigue, which is really normal. And the more we fight against it or try to solve it and try to figure it out, as opposed to just viewing this as a normal part of your insomnia recovery. So as much as you can, accept it, take care of yourself, of course, but accept it as much as possible. So I hope that helps. What do you think, Veronica?
Yes, absolutely. I don't really have much to add. This was just really my go-to very first thought. Like, yeah, it is so very common. We call it like post-arousal fatigue when we are
Yeah.
really in this hyperarousal for a really long time. Then, when the hyperarousal goes down, the real fatigue is unmasked, and then we feel how really, really tired we have been all the time, but only now we feel it. And
Mhm.
don't be scared if it takes longer, if you would anticipate, or longer if you would like to. It is This stage is not pleasant, but it is
Mhm.
a part of recovery, right? So it's very, very common to
Yeah.
take some time.
And can I add one more thought onto that, Veronica, as well?
Yeah.
Just this idea of, she mentioned the 6 hours, and while that's a really average number for a lot of people, everyone's different. We all sleep different amounts, and we all sleep differently, different nights. So if you're somebody who is used to sleeping longer, in your past before insomnia, this is going to come. You have to sort of allow that to come back, as opposed to trying to force it to come back or trying to chase more hours of sleep. That's not helpful. So just know that it's going to come on its own. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, this is a great point. Like, you always can become the sleeper you were before your
Yeah.
insomnia. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much, Michelle, for answering. And right, so we have also a nice questions from Niha. I feel very trapped because I know my brain has to stay in hyperarousal in order to recover, but deep down my brain knows the excess cortisol caused by hyperarousal causes many issues such as puffy face, weight gain, irregular periods, hair fall, which I've all had, God forbid,
Mm-hmm.
even thyroid issues. My brain truly doesn't believe that hyperarousal is safe to experience and doesn't cause harm. Now I'm terrified that I won't ever leave this toxic cycle. So I can feel so much pain and struggle from this short message. So what are your thoughts, Michelle?
Yeah, so there's a lot there, and I think first, could you put up the first part of the question? Of
Of course.
actually, yeah, because the first thing, Niha, that you said is that I feel trapped because I know my brain has to stay in hyperarousal in order to recover, and that was the first thing that jumped out at me. This idea that we have to stay in it in order to recover. That assumption, just wanted to challenge that. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But we don't have to stay in constant perpetual hyperarousal in order to recover. It's more that we want to become more accepting of the moments where we are hyperaroused, even if it feels like days and days on end. But this idea of like, well, I know I have to stay here in order to recover. So that jumped out at me, Veronika. I don't know if you're reading that
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
way, this idea of I have to stay here to recover. Maybe that comes a little bit from this idea of I know I have to be exposed to hyperarousal and fear in order to recover. So that could be the where it's coming from, because we do talk about, facing fear, starting to respond differently to our fear, to our hyperarousal symptoms, to being awake. So that's true, but I wouldn't want to extend that out to assuming that your brain has to stay in a constant state of hyperarousal. If anything, we're we're slowly teaching your brain that it's safe to come out of hyperarousal, right? So I know there's a lot more here, but I want to pass it over to you for a moment to see if you have any initial thoughts or anything.
Yes, actually, this. So I was also going to the same direction like you were going,
Yeah.
Michelle, and because this feels not very pleasant, I have to stay here in
Yeah,
order to
absolutely
recover.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And definitely, again, I very often refer to you, like what you taught me, like it's helpful to be in this kind of, to have these opportunities, or to teach our brain that when we
Mhm.
are in opportunity, that when we are in anxiety, or when we are experiencing sleeplessness, this is an opportunity to teach our brain that we can navigate through it in a different way as we did in the past. So seeing this, like, okay, I can be in hyperarousal, in this kind of struggle when I'm experiencing this, and navigating through it in a different way. This is how we are teaching our brain. Yes, like we can navigate through it, and we can give our brain like different experience. That's true.
Mhm.
But also, you don't have to stay in this forever. You can give yourself break. You can you can distract yourself. You can befriend wakefulness. You can watch your favorite show. You can go for a walk, go for a run, anything that feels pleasant and at the same time distracts you from these very heavy emotions, from the anxiety, from the feeling of doom, and from the feeling I'm staying in this forever,
Mhm.
right? So these were my go-to thoughts. And when she was mentioning, like, in order to recover, but deep down my brain knows that the excess cortisol caused by hyperarousal causes many issues such as puffy face, and so on, irregular periods, hair fall. Um, it's not so straightforward that hyperarousal or high level cortisol causes these kind of issues. But of course, when we are stressed, when we are when we experience a lot of pressure, a lot of when we are not feeling well, of course, there are many symptoms that we encounter. And but these are again things that we cannot control. And when we experience them, we can learn how to face these situations, so to say. So uh, when you're saying like you experience even thyroid issues, of course, it's hard to uncouple these two things. Like I have thyroid issues because I experience
Mhm.
hyperarousal. This many people have thyroid issues even if they don't experience hyperarousal, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's why uncoupling these two things, like these physical symptoms from hyperarousal, I believe that this is the way that can help us to be more kind to ourselves and more accepting of hyperarousal. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, can I share, like, from what you're saying, kind of brought up a couple brief thoughts before we go
right,
on. And again, I feel like sometimes it is really tricky to answer these questions because we're just getting a snippet and we don't really know.
right.
There's sort of that difference between feeling anxious about our health as we're going through this, which I think most people do, and then actually experiencing all of the symptoms that you mentioned, Neha. So, for example, like all the lists that you shared, and then the thyroid issues, and Daniel and I are going to be releasing a video, I think, at the end of this week on a discussion on the investigative stage of insomnia, which is just where we're seeking answers and we're looking for underlying conditions that all of us go through this. And I just wanted to mention, if you are experiencing everything that you've listed, so I couldn't get a sense of, is this more of a health anxiety question or more I'm experiencing all of these things? And she had also mentioned thyroid issues. So I just wanted to sort of put out there that if you're experiencing all of this, it is best to go to your doctor and sort of rule out something like a thyroid condition, where sometimes we can have a thyroid condition which creates a lot of symptoms like you listed, and including sleep disruption. And then the way we relate to that sleep disruption can create insomnia over time. And then the insomnia can kind of get blamed for everything that's going on
Mhm.
symptom wise. And so I have run into this in the past a little bit, where where maybe somebody hasn't gone through and the investigative stage, where they never went to their doctor, let's say at the beginning,
Mhm.
which is always the best thing to do when anything's happening. So I just wanted to share that if you are experiencing all of those things, including thyroid issues, it's always worth just going to your doctor, ruling things out, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great point, Michelle. Thank you so much. So, right, I just we can go to other comments and um, right, we have a question from Exceptional Gamers. Hi. Hey coaches, I'm afraid of hallucinating due to insomnia sleep deprivation. Is it possible to hallucinate due to insomnia? Can you educate me on the subject? How do I overcome the fear?
Mm.
So, what are your thoughts, Michelle?
Right. I understand that fear completely. It's very, very rare to hallucinate as part of this experience. It is possible. Ultimately, it's a change in the way our brain is processing information. It's very temporary. It's very safe to experience. Sometimes people can experience a little bit of what we call derealization as part of the anxiety experience around all of this, which is very similarly just a change in the way our brain is processing information about our environment, which can feel a little bit dreamlike, in the moment, or a bit like a hallucination as well. So sometimes that particular symptom can be viewed a little bit that way. So overall, a hallucinating when you're going through this, it's possible. It's very, very rare. And it's not something we come across a lot. So for the most part, it really isn't part of the experience. And it's more about the fear itself, because you mentioned I'm really afraid of this. And so a lot of the times during insomnia, we develop fear around not just being awake at night, but around a particular symptom we're having, or health anxiety, as we just talked about in the earlier question, or we might develop a fear around a symptom that we've never even had, like you're saying here, you've not experienced it, but you're afraid of it. And so in this case, I know it seems like the obvious answer is to get the reassurance that this is impossible or rare, when really it's much more about working with the fear that's coming up from this. Because what you might find is sometimes our fear kind of jumps around a little bit because we are in these states of fear and survival where, let's say you're able to let go of this fear today because I've just said this is really rare, it's really unlikely. It's possible that then a new fear could pop up, because that's a very common thing, right? Our brain is looking for certain things to hold on to, grasp onto in fear, to keep us in these fear states. And so it's much more helpful to actually work with the fear part of it as opposed to the specific topic that the fear has temporarily latched onto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's more about the fear than really the thing that
Yeah.
your brain has really, like you said,
Right.
linked onto.
Like, well, what about this? Right? What about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And I
Exactly.
think we've all been there where the moment where we feel better about one symptom or one concern, the next one pops up and it just,
Yeah.
and so it's really, really,
Yeah.
know that that's very normal, but working with the fear is the much more helpful way out of
Right.
that particular cycle, as opposed to the specific topics or symptoms
Yeah.
that your
Exactly.
brain wants to focus on in the moment.
Yeah. It really feels like I have to solve the fears of this,
Yes.
and this. But in fact, you really need to focus on the emotion
Yeah.
that you feel. And it's not
Mhm.
really the topic
Yep.
that your brain has picked up. And anyway, what I would just add is just, even even if this is really rare, but even if this happens, that you really do hallucinate, it's not going to hurt you.
Mhm.
It is not something that is here to harm you, right? So um, it is, like, I remember Daniel explaining this in a way that this is a stage between re, um, dreaming and wakefulness. When you
Mhm.
are falling asleep, you may feel like hallucinating because the reality seems to be skewed a little, and
Mhm.
it may, when you're experiencing hyperarousal, you might get scared. Oh my goodness, have I hallucinated it? Oh my god, this is not
Yeah.
good, right? Then this is how we create fears.
Mhm.
When we are just normalizing the things, hey, this is just something like uh, just a different way our brain is perceiving the reality right now. It is nothing that's going to hurt me. Then in this way, we can work on the fear.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, da-da-da-da-da. Thank you very much. We have a question from Elias. Hi, Elias. Hello there, and thank you for this channel. Please, I have read a study about sleep that says that poor sleep causes reduced birth growth, and this is what my fear led to. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. I don't think we should stay much on this topic because we just explain it. It's simply our our brain latches our fear on various things, various topics, and it's about working on the fear itself, not really about the topic, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
and we have a question from Sharon. Hi, Sharon. I was making progress with my sleep patterns, then it just became worse all over again. I went back to meds and it doesn't work at all. I'm now back to the natural way, but the more I tell myself to be calm,
Mhm.
the more I panic. I always tell myself positive affirmations just to be calm, but it's not working, or should I still give it time? So the first thing I would say to Sharon, please stay longer on this channel and you will see our approach, which is much, much more different than from the general approach there is to calm ourselves down, to find something that works for sleep, because um, Sleep cannot be controlled. Sleep is a passive process. And the more we are trying to sleep, the more sleep becomes elusive. And it's very, very common also that sleep is somehow we get out of insomnia in a way that we are starting to sleep in more, but then something happens. There is some trigger, there is some stressor, there is maybe you got sick, you travel, and your sleep gets disrupted again. And from the sleep disruption easily becomes fear of not sleeping, right?
Mhm.
So when you just stay a little bit longer on our channel, I believe you will understand the way we approach this. Is
Mhm.
there anything you would like to add, Michelle?
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with you. It's a common misconception that we always have to be calming ourselves down all the time. I understand why, because when we're hyperaroused, it doesn't feel particularly good. We want to calm down and feel calm. And that can lead us into a pattern of every time we feel that hyperarousal come on and we're having an anxiety experience, that we sort of panic a little bit and go, I got to calm myself down. I got to calm myself down. And Sharon, you mentioned the positive affirmations, sort of using those to try to make yourself be calm. There's nothing there's nothing wrong with positive affirmations specifically. So I'm not attacking that in any way. It's more that the more we are trying to force ourselves to be calm, one, it doesn't work so well. You may have noticed it can lead to a lot of frustration. And in the moment, if we're going through, let's say, anxiety, panic, we're in a hyper aroused state, and our response to that is to try to force ourselves to calm down, it can send the wrong message to our brain that we're actually in a state that is unsafe, right? That this experience of anxiety and hyperarousal is really unsafe. And so, therefore, we need to make it go away. We need to escape it in some way. And so it sort of reinforces to our brain that we are in a dangerous situation. This sleep thing, this anxiety thing, this is all a really big threat, because look at how hard you're trying to get away and stop the experience every time it's there. So even though it feels really counterintuitive, going in that opposite direction and actually building capacity to be able to be with the discomfort of feeling very hyper aroused, um, practicing being more surrendered to it. And then if you still want to do something like positive affirmations, at least you're doing it from that place where you're coming into a place of acceptance first, and then you might do something like that if you happen to like that, which it is helpful if it helps you move through that experience, but is unhelpful if you're using it to combat the experience. And so I know that that's a much, Veronika and I could probably go on and on about this particular one a lot. So I'll stop
Absolutely.
there. But that's just an overview of, I think,
Hmm.
that
Absolutely.
that concept in general. Are you using it to fight, or are you using it to help you move through, is another way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. We have a now very philosophical question from Jimmy. Which do you think is worst for your health? Long-term poor sleep over 10 years or the side effects of sleeping pills? Well, I think into this question, many factors play a role, but I can tell you that I have basically experienced both. I experienced insomnia for many years. I have experienced taking pills for many years, and now that I feel recovered, I don't see any side effects of really of years of struggle. So it, but what I would see is, I don't want to call it a problem, but the question itself,
Mm-hmm.
because these kind of questions are talking about this hypothetic, possible, scary future, which we can say this is like an anxious thoughts. This is a story that our brain is telling us, that our a story that our brain is trying to warn us about. But if we could like uncouple ourselves from this story, if we can look at it like, hey, this is just a story my brain is trying to tell me, and my brain wants to keep me safe, it wants me to survive, and it's telling me like, this is the worst what can happen, and you need to work on this. But the trick is, don't do anything, don't work on this,
Mhm.
in a way that uh, when you are constantly doing every day uh, things that will prevent you from having a sleepless night, that will prevent you from taking pills, you are going to have a ton of struggle. But on the other hand, when you allow yourself the, okay, I'm going to have a probably sleepless night, and this happens. This is not the end of the world. This is something I can learn myself to work on, to create space for the difficulties, for the struggle. And this is how I overcome this. Uh, Also, your brain will, in the end, understand that it makes no sense to think about these hypothetical ideas. And even if it does, it's only up to you. You are the one who decides whether to believe this idea or not. So,
Mhm.
uh, is there anything you would like to share, Michelle?
No, I think that's pretty much it. It's one of those questions, you're right. It's a future based, nobody knows the answer to those types of questions. And it also, our own perception shapes these things as well. Of course, I'm not saying it's only that, but for example, somebody taking a sleeping pill every day, but really beating themselves up for it, really judging it, being in a constant state of worry about the impacts of that sleeping pill for the duration that they're on it, that's going to be a much more difficult experience overall. And I would even say more potential impact from that than somebody who takes the pill from a place of self-care and acceptance and doesn't really worry about it that much. So I know that's a different way of thinking about it, but that will influence the experience that we have overall. And that sort of ties into even our own perception of stress and how that shapes stress itself. So I know, again, larger conversation, but I agree
Yes,
with you,
exactly.
Veronika. It's an unanswerable question. And so think about really where that question is coming from more than trying to answer that question.
I think we can answer last question, Michelle.
Sure.
And we have a question from Jonas. I'll pick one question from
Sure.
Jonas. Hi, Jonas. Another question is, with the OCD medication, my recurring thoughts about sleep are no longer so constant. Before I spent the whole day thinking about it, it was just thoughts that brought me anxiety and anguish. I think I lacked full acceptance of my condition, but I didn't know I had this compulsion to think. How can I react to the rest of the thoughts that still appear in my mind? How can I focus on the courage to let go, knowing that every waking day we have a day with nervousness, headaches, and tiredness?
Mhm.
So, what are your thoughts, Michelle?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. How do I work with the thoughts that are still coming up? I'm glad the medication is helping. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And really, there's not just one way to work with thoughts that can be helpful. And this is also a larger question that we can't fully answer here. But any approach that is going to help you be the observer of those thoughts as opposed to buying into those thoughts, believing those thoughts, needing to take action on those thoughts, right, is going to be helpful. So that's really what we're looking for is, can you become more of an observer so that you're able to notice and detach in a compassionate way for yourself, and then really come back more into the present moment, because a lot of the times our thoughts are very future based. You probably are noticing that, Jonas, that it's all future worries or what happens tonight or all of this kind of stuff. So coming back into the practice and coming back into the moment in and of itself can be a really powerful practice. So I hope that's helpful overall, just as a conceptual guide for all of that. And I think I may not have answered the last part of his question, the very last.
I think I lost it.
Oh no, that's okay. I feel bad.
What are
Um,
you? The one.
Oh, right. It wasn't a question. It was something that when he said, when every waking day we have a day with nervousness, headaches, and tiredness. So I know that we can have days like this. I remember them well. And really, I think what I wanted to share is to, when we're going through this experience, it can become really easy to become resigned to to expecting every day to look like that. That's every day. Every day is horrible. There's no hope. I have all these symptoms. It's really bad. And I'm not saying you're saying this to yourself, Jonas. I'm sort of extrapolating just a little bit based on what you wrote. But if you notice that you have this constant expectation that every day is going to be really, really hard, because there have been really hard days. So I'm not saying there haven't been, but it can actually help to start to shift that expectation of what every day has to look like, because really our brains are going to create more and more of what we expect, not what we want, what we expect. So I just want to just share that in case you're finding yourself, really, really expecting expecting the worst every single day. That can make things harder and actually create more of what we don't want.
Yes, thank you so much, Michelle. So we have a couple of thank you notes. We have a note from Pempi. Actually, Pempi, he was in my Orange team, and he's writing, with your teaching, I realized I needed to stop thinking my sleep needed to be perfect for me to recover. I now sleep better 90% of the time. Thank you for that. Love to everyone going through it. Thank you so much, Pampi. I'm really, really glad that you took your time and wrote a comment, because it means a lot knowing that people who went through our program, from our insomnia immunity program, are doing better. And also a thank you note from Sharon. That was helpful. Thank you both. I will stay put here to keep learning. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Those questions haven't been answered. You will have another chance next week with our Q&A. And I thank you, Michelle, for being here today. And I wish you a really, really good time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.